fourth way. Ready, set, go. Okay. So Charles Sanders Peirce, the father of semiotics, very interesting character. William James tried to get him a job at Harvard and told Charles Sanders Peirce, please don't use any big words in your interview and seminar presentation at Harvard. And naturally, Charles Sanders Peirce said, no, I'm not going to do that, and just developed like a dozen triads. He's very famous for his triads. And of course, he didn't get the job. And it was questionable anyway because he had a partner and they were not married. And at that time, Harvard didn't hire faculty that lived in that kind of way. So he was kind of a rebel, which appeals to me. So Grace Ann and I got to go to New Zealand, and that university that invited us for a whole month gave us a house to live and food, and just picked us up at the, I mean, it was, wow, so different than the way they treat us in New Mexico. It was wonderful. But they had in their library all of the volumes of Charles Sanders Peirce's work, and I was so excited that one of the doctoral students checked it out, and I had all the volumes there. And remember, in the kitchen table, at all of the works of Charles Sanders Peirce. And I wanted to find out this notion of a self-correcting induction, and it's sort of here and there throughout the volumes of all of his writing. Since this is a workshop on writing, Charles Sanders Peirce deserves to be mentioned, I think. And the volume of work is just amazing, but I don't think many people have time in their life to actually read all of it,
And we don't have time to go into all of it.
I'm not going to go into all of it, I'm just pulling out the self-correcting part. Okay, so they had this idea of a self-correcting induction. So as you know, you have deduction, your theoretical ideas, you have deductive theories, so you have a general theory and you're deducting, and then you go gather cases. Those cases are the inductive cases. So, and then the question is, how do you avoid the black swan phenomenon? The black swan is, they used to think all swans were white, but then some British guy traveled to, let's say, New Zealand and found a black swan. They weren't all white swans, like the ones swimming in Malmo. There's two swans you can go see in Malmo. So Charles Sanders Peirce said, well, you could use self-correcting induction, where you keep gathering cases and building your main deductive theory and look for cases that are against it. So what we do, Grace Ann and I, we advise researchers to collect not just the cases that will reinforce your theory, but collect cases that will be from people against your theory. And again, to return to the Kosovo example, if you had to interview the people from SLAP, which is a really good acronym, Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation, and then you would be doing Charles Sanders Peirce self-correcting induction, because, okay, you're interviewing the star of the show, whose name I will not be able to pronounce, but something like that.
Hope in English.
Hope in English. So you're interviewing Hope, who's all about the positive aspects of being an activist, but if you can interview the other side of that, why are these people doing this, slapping this activist with lawsuits? You you start to get a more of a self-corrective methodology. So Charles Sanders Peirce said there are 4 kinds of tests that you can use in doing the self-correcting approach. And the first test is to do your own intuitive reflection. So understand the questions that you all wrote on the board and intuitively what makes sense about that. Then, if you're not satisfied, do test 2, which is go out and talk to people from SLAP and talk to the woman that's got hope and do the interviews with more people surrounding that problem area. If that is still not satisfying to you, do the 3rd test, which is to engage other kinds of sciences. So for your project, obviously, hydrology and the study of what makes a river alive and how rivers are deadened when you put dams in them. Because that was what our activists. I hope you don't mind me using your example, but
Please
you know, I'm not writing the dissertation. So that's the 3rd test. He said, if that still is not enough, then you would do like Hannah Arendt. You would be a political activist and you would actually engage in an experiment or a change initiative. So you would do an experiment, which is more expensive to do, or you could do an intervention, a change intervention, and try to prove your thesis, whatever it is. So those are the 4 tests of induction. The self-correcting part has to do with incrementally studying as you go. It's kind of like trial and error. Like you try to understand the phenomenon, you get so far and you don't understand all of it, and you make another jump and you try to understand a little more. So it's always a longitudinal process. So the thing that a lot of new researchers do, which I don't recommend, is collecting a lot of interviews and then getting them transcribed and then try to write it up. That would be the opposite of doing self-correcting induction, because in self-correcting induction you do 1 or 2 interviews, let's say one from SLAP and 1 from HOPE. You transcribe that, and then you say, well, this is what I know and this is what I don't know, and the questions I still have. Then you interview more people on both sides of that. You don't have to do this, I'm not recommending it, but if you want to do self-correcting induction, is to keep going until you run out of energy, you know, or you've answered the question and you're pretty sure there's no black swan swimming around in your data to bite you in the ass. So that is the self-correcting induction. Now, we had a very wonderful doctoral student in the Maori culture, indigenous culture in New Zealand, and I explained this much to him, and he came back the next day with a whole drawing and explained that in the Maori indigenous culture, one did not go and do interviews and extract stories from people like, I don't know, like some kind of robber. You know, I'm robbing you of your story and I'm not giving you anything. You can bring the gift of your own story first, and then you can ask them to share their story. So that meant that in his research, which he was an IT guy, that he would share the story he had, and then they would share their story back. Now, it's completely forbidden in most qualitative studies to do that because they're pretending to be quantitative scientists, which is total bullshit. And instead, he wanted to share the gift and get the gift back, and then share another gift and get the gift back. So in the interview, it would be a very uncommon interview because of the exchange going on where the researcher isn't hiding and pretending not to have their own story and not to have their own insight. And the nice thing about doing that with self-correcting induction is that I taught ethnography at UCLA during my time there, and I've taught it ever since. So let's say about 35 years teaching ethnography and autoethnography, that working out your theory with the participant is co-inquiry. It's one of the most elegant things to do in a research design, is to invite your person to be a participant, like Hope could become a participant with you in the inquiry if you are willing to share your insights as you go along. She could coach you and help you test out with an N of 1, your ideas, Is that it?
5 minutes left for questions.
Okay, thank you very much.